Okay guys, we are down to the stinky part of this whole thing. Alright, so yeah, we've got a piece of rock bait. You guys saw just now how we collected it, and there was also a little short video on how we fermented it and the process. Before I get there, there's another little trick I want to show you guys quickly. So this monofilament line I've got here is the same line that I used from the swivel down to the hook. And it's a little trick that not a lot of people talk about, but I'm going to show you what we do here. So I'll line it up with the line going down to the hook, just above the hook, and I do that exact same uni knot. I go once, twice through that loop, and then I set this knot from both sides onto that line. Okay, normally I put it in my teeth, I'm not going to do it now. So you want that knot really tight on that line above the hook. Then we're going to cut those tag ends about 3 or 4 mils on either side of that knot. Like that. Okay, the purpose of that little gadget, gizmo, is once it's really set, it's really tight and it's really hard to pull up the line. So you set it approximately, you know, the size of the bait you're going to be putting on the hook. So what that does is, during the cast, you've got this bait over the hook, and when you throw, your bait tends to, with the centrifugal forces, wants to pull up the shaft and over the bend and shank of the hook, and it chokes and smothers the point of the hook, which you always want exposed. So you're going to be putting your bait over that secondary figure of 8 knot on your hook line going up, and that stops your bait from sliding down. Okay, 2 ways to handle this bait. Generally, I prefer to tear it. Okay, I'm going to get dirty for you guys, and I'm going to tear it the way it should be done. And the reason for that is tearing it exposes more of that really, and you guys need to smell this to understand. It exposes a lot more of the stinkier flesh of the rock bait. So this number 2 hook, if I was going to go for a slightly longer bait, you always want to, in any bait situation, you want the bulk of the bait to be near the bend of the hook. So if you had the bulk of the bait up on your line and the thinner section of bait at the hook end of your setup, the weight through the cast would drag the heavier part down up the shank and choke the hook. So I'll come down possibly 1/3 of the way from the back, the skin side. You want the gutsiness on the outside. So I'll come in from the back, I'll pop it through 1/3 of the way down, I'll pull that hook through nice and proud, then I fold it backwards, leaving quite a lot of that hook exposed. Then we'll take our bait cotton. You'll see what I've done here, the same cotton that we showed you earlier on, except I've put the lid from a Powerade bottle on mine. It gives me control over the amount of tension I have on my cotton at all times, this being mounted on my waist strap or belt. Okay, another key thing with this bait, guys, is you don't want a ton of cotton. There are 2 places on the setup where you want to put a bit more cotton than the rest. The one is where you would guess the base of the eye of the hook is. You want to give it a couple more cranks, and that so that the bait doesn't slide over the eye of the hook. Then you'll come up to where you've put that little figure of 8 on your line, and you want to give it a couple more turns just above that knot that you put in, and then securing the bait up the line just a couple of turns. We're trying to keep it as straight as possible. You don't want this curly looking thing, you want it so hanging that bait like this straight up and down will always keep it straight. So there's a straight, and the reason for that, again, fish will come in, consume the bait. You want a straight bait coming out of that fish's mouth. When I get up to this bulk end of it, I'll fold the bulk back. We'll add a bit more cotton to it. And then I have something that's probably just a force of habit, where I give it a little single clinch, and I do it twice. I just feel that there's less of a chance of my latex cotton turning loose and finding a place to tangle on my sinker line or my swivel, etc. Snap it off, and then I'll give it a little pull. And you see what happened? My hook is pulled down perfectly. The bulk of my bait is lined up with the top of my hook, and it can't go any further. I can give it a good old yank, and it can't go any further, leaving that hook perfectly exposed at all times, and the bulk of the bait. So any fish being an opportunistic feeder, the effort they're putting into the amount of energy they're going to gain from the food they eat are going to go for the biggest part of the bait, and that's the bulk end, and that's where the hook end is, and that's where the business end of the setup is. And then finally, we take that little float and we slide it down, so that if this does happen to get eaten away by little peckers, golden stripies, or tiny blacktail, that float has got the buoyancy to lift that bare hook up and keep it out of the rocks so you don't get hooked up. That is disgusting, guys. But there it is.
it's so stinky. It's so stinky.
There it is right there. So that is the way I recommend it. It may not be the perfect way or the only way, but it certainly does work. And as you can see, I'm giving it a good old crank and I'm not choking that hook at all.
Killy.
Oh, goodness gracious.